One. Hello, and welcome to the College Crossecast, a lacrosse news, analysis, and commentary podcast. My name is Saif Fakadu, and I'm one of your co-hosts for the show today. On the other lines with me are my co-hosts and the only guys I trust in my pit crew, Jake Nazar and Ryan McDonald. Gentlemen, what's going on? How are you boys doing?
I'm good. You really look like you're giving a presentation right now.
Right, this is my TED. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk here in Trenton, New Jersey. This is our first time using the camera, so hopefully we don't get flamed too much online.
And I'm Ryan. I'm usually the host of this, but I've been busy this spring wrapping up grad school in addition to my normal teaching career. But had some time to hop on board, get to see my background and everything. And I'm sick of TED Talks because the LIU teaching program loves. If I have to see that one TED Talk by that teacher about whether students give or whatever, I'm going to scream. I think I've seen it for every course at this point. Don't show it.
Yeah, my bad if I totally messed up that intro. I thought we were just doing like we've been doing with Jake and I for the last few weeks. But anyway, folks. Exactly. Anyway, folks, we're glad you guys join us. Hopefully, you guys are excited for the first real big weekend of college lacrosse. You know, think of 20 games this weekend, right around there. And obviously, to start with the Big Ten conference and stuff. But one thing we want to just first clear off before we get into our other issues tonight is reviewing the polls. And Jake, I don't know if you wanted to run point. You always do a great job with compiling our votes together, but showing the national polls and how we, our poll individually as well.
Yeah. So we have. Let me pull our poll up in my. On my end.
In fact, for our YouTube watchers, I'll actually share it right now so you can see it as well.
Love.
Oh my god, this is.
Look at this synergy.
You love to see it. You love to see it.
So yeah, the College Cross Top 20. Big news for us on our end is North Carolina has moved up to number 1 in our polls. 3 of us had Carolina ranked in the top spot, as you can see if you're watching along. Boom. It was Adam, me, and Saif. So 2 of the 3 of us on here moved the Tar Heels into the top spot in the rankings. Ryan and Chris kept Duke at number 1. Those were the 2 teams on Tobacco Road. They got number 1 votes. The other big move, Virginia, moved up into the 3rd spot. Adam and myself had Virginia ranked number 3, as did Chris. Ryan and Saif had them a bit further back in 5th. Maryland dropped 2 spots to number 4. Syracuse is at number 5 to round it out. Then we get into Penn State, Georgetown, Ohio State, Loyola, Notre Dame. That is your top 10. Loyola moved into the top 10, mostly by the fact that we bumped the Ivy League out of our rankings, even ahead of the Ivy League's news of not having spring competition this year, which we'll get into in a bit. But we decided that we felt the Ivy League wasn't going to be playing, and so we moved the Ivy League out of our rankings, and that's kind of shuffled everything up a bit. I think we had Yale was 7th in our rankings coming when we started in the preseason before they announced their cancellation. Cornell was 10th, so that was 2 spots for someone like Loyola to move up, 2 spots for Georgetown. Penn State jumped up a spot because they were behind Yale. Denver fell from 6th to 11th by virtue of their 2 losses to Duke and then the big one to North Carolina. UMass is 12th. They are the 2nd highest ranked mid-major, you could say, behind Loyola, and really mid-major. It's kind of like Gonzaga, but that's Loyola in 12th. Army didn't really budge too much after loss to Virginia. And then we kind of get into a big hodgepodge here from 14th to 20th, where I think you could kind of credibly argue any order, and no one would really disagree with you. Hopkins 14, Rutgers 15, Lehigh at 16, Stony Brook's in the top 20 at 17. They beat down Sacred Heart. High Point had an impressive win over Robert Morris, and then after that, they took North Carolina to the wire in 18th. Denver is in 19th, or not Denver, Delaware rather, in 19th. But this follows, this was before their loss to Mount St. Mary's when they were missing their entire attack unit. And then at 20th, we have Villanova. They'll make their debut this weekend against Georgetown. This, compared to the IL Media poll, they kept Duke at number 1. Carolina did move up to number 2. We've got the same top 5, though. They've got Notre Dame at 7, which is a bit high for my tastes. Ohio State, Georgetown, Loyola State at 11th. Lehigh is their big move at 14. They also kept Richmond in after Richmond's loss to Loyola on Sunday. But then similar Rutgers, Villanova, Hopkins, Stony Brook.
Yeah, so that's how we voted. Stop sharing the screen there, so for those watching. But yeah, I think, a big part for us was, we're in a little bit of a situation where not every team has played just yet. So it's a lot of moving pieces and kind of just, I think the next week or two, it's going to be a bit more cohesive and coherent. As right now, it's kind of like a big jumble on how we wanted to approach it. Are we rewarding the teams that played already compared to those that haven't played yet? Are we teams like Maryland and Syracuse getting hurt too much for not playing, whereas UNC and Duke and Virginia already played 2 or 3 games? The back end of the top 20 was a lot of different pieces. Are we rewarding some of these mid-major teams that got pretty good wins, but putting them ahead of teams that just haven't played yet? So this week was a little bit of a weird poll to put out, but I think everybody decided, there's been enough games that it was enough to put out a ranking. But I think starting this upcoming weekend, you're going to start to see a bit more of a clear picture and more order to what's to come.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that was mentioned, friend of the pod, Josh Rothenberg, he was on Twitter, and he mentioned that if Syracuse and Virginia was going to move above Syracuse and Maryland after their results, then maybe Virginia should have just been above them to begin with. And that's a fair point. That's potentially true. You can make that case. My feeling is, and kind of how I'm doing it this week, or this year rather, I don't really mind moving teams around a lot. Like if Maryland comes out and drops 20 goals on Michigan, then I'll probably move Maryland back up to number 2 because I still think Maryland is the second or third best team in the country. They just haven't played yet. I haven't seen it. Well, I've seen Virginia beat down Towson, not the vintage Towson team, but Towson did get a good win over St. Joe's as well this past weekend, and then they beat Army in impressive fashion. It was a top 15 team. And if Syracuse comes out and beats Army in similar fashion to Virginia, then maybe I'll move Syracuse back up. I don't have a problem kind of shifting teams around with how much kind of chaos there's going to be this year and how weird things are going to look. And then the second piece for me is I'm really looking at how teams are, how you play. Like, do you look good? How like dominant are you? Normally it's kind of a combination of who you played and who you beat, and then how good you look. And I've kind of often felt a lot that if you're looking for just a ranking of, who you beat, that's like what RPI is for. Like that's, if you're looking for, a nice like composite of who did you beat, that's what the NCAA tournament is for. That's ranking, who you beat. Our ranking is more like we're ranking who we think are the best teams. But I think especially this year, like the Big Ten's just going to play the Big Ten. I can't compare like strength of schedule really. Who you beat. So, like, do I think Stony Brook? I had Stony Brook 14th. Do I think Stony Brook's the 14th best team in the country? I don't know. Probably not. But Stony Brook looked like one of the 20 best teams in the country, certainly, the way they played against Sacred Heart, even if Sacred Heart isn't great. So, do I think, even kind of on the flip end, like, do I think Loyola is a top 10 team? They might not be, but I did see them get a win over a good team in Richmond, still at 19th. So I'll, move them up a bit as well, even though mostly it was, by virtue of the Ivy League canceling out. But yeah, for me, it's, how do you look? If you go out there and you beat teams and you look impressive to me, and then in kind of the numbers as well, then I'm going to rank teams kind of high. I'm not going to try to get bogged down by like, oh, well, they didn't play a great opponent. Like some of these teams are scheduling games on like 3 days notice. Like how much are we going to try and care too much about who you play. And even the NCAA tournament probably isn't going to be a great reflection of that if they kind of adjust the seeding or selection criteria the way we think they might.
Jake, one thing I wanted to note in our DMs that we discussed is we saw teams that actually rose from their preseason rankings after these first official rankings, and I think we kind of found that odd, and we all discussed that together. But I was like, I think it's because like we accepted the fact that the Ivy wasn't going to be kind of playing, and so like a lot of the other polls and preseason stuff, like you would have Penn, Cornell, maybe even Yale in their top 20. So you have three teams right there. And like once the news started trickling out, and we'll talk about that more later, all these teams like Army and other teams that maybe didn't have that great of a weekend, they still went up. It's like, well, because these, three teams that were in the top 20 or Ivy Leagues are like, except for, I guess, Lacrosse Magazine, because they still have Cornell and Penn. But everyone else kind of accepted that they were gone. But I thought our polls, like, it's extremely reasonable. Like any Syracuse fan, should be that. I mean, like, we have them fifth. Like, how is that like any disrespect? Like, literally.
I put them. Yeah, I put them. I kept Syracuse and Maryland where I've had them. I had UNC bump up just because they've had an impressive start. I still think at this juncture, Cuse and Maryland, I think, are still going to be better than Virginia. So that's why I had Syracuse 3, Maryland 4, and then Virginia 5. But, again, it's going to be a weird season. And if you want to reward Virginia for starting off the season nicely, that's fine. And as I said, I think we're going to see a little bit more clarity in the next week or two. And things will kind of shuffle stuff out. And I think, too, again, a lot of it is adjusting for the Ivies getting knocked out of it. So, like, Hopkins I don't think Hopkins is the 14th best team in the nation by any means, but I had him, around 17, 18, and we're removing 3 teams.
there goes 3 teams.
So,
for like last year, it's like even last year, I think it illustrates it well. Like, the Ivy had 5 teams in the top 20 last year?
Yeah.
Like that's like a fourth of the that's a fourth of the poll. And obviously it's a bit less this year with 3, but that's a big consideration. That's why I think you kind of see more mid majors. Villanova's not mid major, but Richmond, Lehigh, High Point, Stony Brook. That's why you kind of see these teams getting in the mix, and I think I just think I think it's be prepared for weirdness. I think it's kind of a good way of sort of looking at it. Like, like a Big Ten team could go 4-6, and I still might think that they're a top 20 team or a top 15 team, because what if they beat Maryland and Penn State? Like, and I think, or they looked really good and they, in those 6 games, the Big Ten's going to be, a bit of a landmine in terms of trying to sort out. And I think that's a good consideration. Or, Stony Brook's primarily playing America East opponents, but if Stony Brook keeps clobbering people, I'm going to rank Stony Brook high, even if I don't think necessarily the America East is the best conference, out there. But yeah, man, like the receiving votes in the IO media poll is wild. Utah got votes, Jacksonville got a vote, Michigan got a vote.
I want to know who voted Jacksonville after getting 18-7.
Jacksonville 18-7. Their one was over Bellarmine, who now is stuck down in the mine with no way out. Bryant got ranked after a win over Providence. Is not a bad team.
Bryant's not bad. Yeah,
Bryant Stony Brook this week could be a pretty good game. That'll be another chance. If Bryant got a solid win over Providence, if Stony Brook goes out there and clobbers Bryant, not saying they will, that'd be something to watch. And then High Point might. I thought High Point played really. We'll get into High Point UNC. I thought High Point played really freaking well against Carolina. They might move up in the top 20 this week. They don't play. They won't play this weekend. But yeah, they might move up as well. Just because I thought, gee, man, they played really freaking well. So that's kind of how if we're looking at mine, it's like I'm not like gonna be. I'm not afraid to move teams around. So it's not like there's if a team dropped 3 spots, it's necessarily indicative of something wrong. I'm just gonna be. I think it's important to be. We've seen teams be flexible in terms of scheduling. Be flexible with your poll.
And if you have any complaints, be sure to reach Chris at Chris_Jast, JAST. Let him know if you have any complaints about our poll. We'll move on. The Ivy League stopped playing hot potato, kind of, sorta, this week, and finally put the kibosh on any thoughts of them having a full schedule. They kept the door open for quote-unquote localized non-conference play. But pretty much they kind of do what we thought they were going to do all along. Not really going to be playing much. You might see maybe in April. In April, you might see a non-con game appear or two, but otherwise, they kind of dropped the whole act. And no Ivy League, but I mean, we could have told you that back in the fall when some schools were already telling their athletes to defer the year, and some did. Some were still under the pretense that they were playing.
Is that like an open secret? Is that I'm curious about how much some people know about what the fall looked like on Ivy League teams. Or like, it was not like they were like all gearing up to play. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, some were like completely open with it. Like I think Princeton was pretty open with it, but then others were still saying.
Yeah,
like,
I think Princeton was open with the women.
That was with women. Yeah, we're like, yeah, we're just punting this year. But like, but then like it looked like Cornell is completely gearing up. Harvard's still posting pictures of them practicing. It's a weird jumbled mess.
That just felt sad. Like, I'm glad they get to keep practicing. I guess I'm glad they get to, be as like they get the team kind of atmosphere and they get to be around each other still. But man, that was kind of tough to watch. One more thing with the IL poll, I think like Virginia got the most first place votes and finished was third in the ranking. It's pretty wild. I just noticed that Virginia got 7 first place votes and was third. That's pretty wild. But yeah, the Ivy League, I posted this on Twitter, and I just think like we know how the COVID like increases and decreases in terms of the spread works by now. Like we know that these things are slow. Like it's not the progress doesn't go fast, and like we're seeing big time decreases right now, but it's still been like a month kind of long process. So from the Ivy League, it's like, man, you would have known. I don't know what their magic number is in terms of number of cases or or spread that makes them go, okay, it's cool to play now, and we're cool with that. We feel that that's safe enough. But whatever it is, you weren't gonna hit it. You would have known on February 1st that you were not gonna hit it by February 19th. Like you would have known, and like they're smart. That we've all been following this stuff for like a year. Like me and Ryan talk about it in our DMs like every day. What the the case numbers going up or down look like with the vaccine and stuff like that. So to me, I don't see how you could have looked at the numbers on February 1st and not said like, all right, if they got to get the positive test rate was 3.9% to today. Let's say that the positive test rate needed was like below 2%, maybe for the Ivy League. I'm just throwing out a number. Man, we knew 18 days ago or a month ago, it wasn't going to get there by March, or it wasn't going to get there in time for, maybe it'll get there by like April, but in April, you're not having a real season. Like it was just, there was no way in my view that they, by looking at what we know, that they could have like determined that, oh, maybe it'll get there by this certain point. They had to know that this was the inevitable outcome, and the fact that they didn't make a decision and they waited this long is just kind of ridiculous. And we talked about the ridiculousness of it, but I think especially that point like needs clarifying. I don't know what their magic numbers are, when the point they feel that it's safe, but it's not gonna have anything that like it clearly wasn't gonna happen by February 18th if this, or 17th, whenever they announced it, if that was like D-Day for making a decision.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not an issue that, that they're punting the season because of COVID. If they feel that it's too risky, it is what it is. But be upfront about it and don't kick the can so far. I mean, it's totally understandable. It's a global pandemic, and you have clearly tougher criteria than other conferences. That's all well and good. Be upfront about it, though. Don't make all these coaches and athletes, have to be sitting around and wondering what's going to come. Just if they were ahead of this and just laid it out there right away, this is, as you're saying, this is our level. We're not going to be hitting that level. It sucks, but at least, you have a rationale behind it and you're being upfront with it. But instead, they kept everybody in limbo, and you're doing this last second.
I mean, I think we were right to commend Princeton. Like, they were pretty much the best, but I don't want to say adults, but like they were like to their players, we're not going to extend you the extra year, immediately. And then, their students made their decisions about, we saw it with the women's team and a lot of the men's team of taking the year off. But like, this is just a great example of like dithering and just doing nothing, and then eventually making a decision that you should have made like weeks, maybe months prior. This is a prime example of that. Because like if the Ivy League, like in the fall, they were like, we're looking forward into spring, doesn't look like anything is going to substantially change from where we are right now in November, December. We're going to make the call now, and you can make your decision in terms of
and look,
your future.
You can always, if their option of not playing, like the kind of backup option is, you can still practice, you can still like have team activities. Well, then you can change. And like if things got better, if teams are still practicing, you can say, you know what, things got better than we thought, and so we're gonna let you guys play, and we're gonna start late, but we're gonna have a conference only schedule, and we'll have a conference tournament, and we'll send a team to the NCAA tournament. You could have done that. I'm not. Go ahead, Sid.
No, absolutely. But the only other thing I was just like, if your decision was like, we're not going to have a tournament and we're not going to have like conference play, if member teams want to make their own decisions and make like their own like schedule, fine type of thing. But like, it would have just gone over so much better if they just did what they were planning on doing, especially the one in January. The one in January was just like, we're not saying anything, but we're saying something because people are yelling at us. And I get it. It's like, it's horrible, but just like, if they had made if they pulled the trigger in January, none of this would happen. Like, because now that as you pointed out, Jake, numbers are going down, and it's just like, again, I hate this word. We chucked around the optics of like canceling now as games are starting with the numbers going down. It just makes it look so much worse. And it's just like, if they did, especially like I worst did it in January. That previous statement, that's when they should have made this announcement. And then it would already been over. It would have been a 1 day story. It would have been like, no one really would have, there would have been some outrage or something, but at least people wouldn't have been hanging around for another month like they are now.
And
go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, as Safe was saying too, with, like if you could have just been upfront and just said, all right, no conference games, then that would have been okay for like a team like a Cornell or a Penn and just be an independent, a quasi-independent for a year.
It's a wild year. Like let the schools make it flexible. That's the word.
But I think the thing that we're getting together on this is that the 7 schools of the Ivy League that play men's lacrosse, none of them were on the same page. Is what it comes down to.
No,
absolutely. Go, Jay.
So I'll make 2 points. One, the numbers are better now, significantly than where they were in the fall. But crucial point here. They are not better than they were in September when the Ivy League decided to cancel football. So the Ivy League already had a template in place and an example of when the numbers looked like this, we didn't feel it was safe enough to play. Okay, that's fair. So you made that decision and that view then at that period in time. And obviously things change in the future, because of weather and things like that. But you made that decision then that based on what we look at now, the numbers aren't good enough. We don't feel they're safe enough to play. Okay. Even if they're better now, they're not going to get to where they were in September, maybe for another month or so around then. So like, if you knew what was good enough in September and you knew it was going to be worse, why did you wait till now? Like anyone could have told you a month ago that like, hey guys, it's going to be worse than it was in September when you decided that you weren't going to play. And so that's another element of it. Like, you made a call already to cancel football, and based on where you were and things were when you made that point in the fall with football, things were not. I mean, none of this is great. Like, there's no 100 COVID cases isn't good really, but you get my
Absolutely.
and then so yeah, like and it's just it's so like we can see through it. Like, it's so obvious to see what the right move here was, and they just didn't make it. And then to go off Ryan's point of the 7 teams of the Ivy League, are on the same page. I think it highlights just this. We all look at the Ivy League kind of as one monolithic kind of body, and it's not. The teams are very different in a lot of ways. There's Harvard, Penn, and Yale. Harvard, you got Princeton as well in there. And these are like the best academic schools in the Ivy League. Like, they are they're the strongest academic schools. They're the most committed in that regard to that element as an institution. But Cornell isn't in that boat. I'm not saying Cornell is not a great school, but Cornell isn't Harvard and a Princeton and a Yale. But Cornell does have stronger sports. Cornell's really great at college hockey. Cornell's long been great at lacrosse. Cornell seemed more like they really wanted to play, and they were more committed to playing than maybe certainly Princeton was, than maybe even Yale, even though ultimately they didn't make that kind of call. Dartmouth isn't, with all due respect to Dartmouth isn't in contention nationally, in terms of are they giving their chance, their athletes a chance? And everyone wants to play. I'm not saying that you only play if you can win the national championship, but still, they're not in contention nationally in the same way. And Penn really wanted to play. I think still wants to play. We can see. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of look at the ways in which the Ivy League kind of has multiple different kind of groups among their kind of 7 members, and that'll be interesting, something to watch in the future as the Ivy probably continues to get pillaged in the transfer portal with these 5th-year guys. I know they said that they're letting seniors come back for another year, but I don't know exactly how that's necessarily implemented.
I think they gave a blanket waiver to everybody, so it's not going to count towards it.
Gotcha.
From what I saw.
Yeah, but that's so.
I mean, that could be. Yeah, I think that would be more so an issue for the upperclassmen in terms of that. I mean, I don't know. There's not really that many lacrosse players that are really going for 5 years. But
so they're given a blanket waiver, but are they allowing grad transfers or graduate students rather? So the current seniors, they're still going to graduate unless they all pull out.
Yeah, I think that might be part of that blanket waiver. Don't quote me on that, but I think they are actually being a little bit more willing towards that, which is going to be something that is going to be interesting to see on it. Because, I mean, for the most part, I mean, there's not really that many lacrosse players that go for the full 5 years of eligibility. I know Syracuse tries it, and it's very unpopular, and Desco loses players for redshirting guys, but that's another story for another day. But I don't know if it's going to, in terms of the long term, I don't think it's going to be as damning as it could have been. But in the short term, yeah, I think definitely the next year or two, you'll see most of the teams in the Ivies take a bit of a hit. And might be a way that some of these schools that were encouraging their players to take the year off might be at a little bit more of an advantage, especially if that graduate rule doesn't really get worked out much.
Well, yeah, and I mean, negative recruiting. I mean, it's gonna happen. The Ivy's gonna get negatively recruited against for skipping out a year while everyone else played. To what degree it'll work, we'll see. The Ivy League.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see how things go in the next 2 months if we get full seasons in and all that. But we'll see. We'll see. The Ivy League again certainly still has a lot to offer. They have some great programs. They have obviously great academics, but a lot of other schools that offer great academics too. The ACC, certainly Georgetown's in that group, Hopkins. So, that'll be something interesting to follow and see how, the Ivy League some of these teams, how committed they are moving forward. And I'm not saying they're not, committed, but yeah, it's hard to look at this to some degree. I know we saw I think Dartmouth tried to
cancel a bunch of sports, then had to go back on it because they realized they violated Title IX. You do just get a whiff of a feeling that like the Ivy just kind of, I'm not saying they're against athletics or they don't like athletics, but that they come from the stance of like, how do we not seem too favorable of athletics? Like how do we look the most opposite of the Big Ten or the SEC, for example?
Yeah.
You do get that kind of feeling, and that kind of sometimes.
And knowing, having friends that played at Ivy League programs too, they expect you to be just like any other ordinary student. You have to go through the whole everything, no exceptions. So that's something to kind of take into consideration too.
Which is always hilarious when you remember that they have 60, 70,000 people stadiums at every single major Ivy. Like that's how they built their brand, by being, great academics, but like major athletic powerhouses.
Well, the stadiums were back from back too.
It kind of reminds me of like a family is like it's all into green energy, but you realize they made their money in tobacco or something. Like something to that effect.
It is a callback to like back in the day when the Ivy Leagues and the Ivies and the military academies were all of the top tier in sports, because you can make that case with Army and Navy too with their huge 60, 70,000.
And at the end of the day, the Ivy League is an athletic conference. That's the only thing that's tying Brown at Harvard, is that they play sports together. So like, to patronize and like condescend to that, it's hilarious. Just to tie a bow on it, like I really feel at the end of the day, like this was just a really good example of like people who are frozen and just like didn't want to get yelled at. And I get it, and it's like that's difficult, but it's just like honestly, it always tells you like assist in time saves 9. Like just doing something now or earlier, a month ago, like this whole issue would have been over with, and like they wouldn't even have to worry about the cases going down. People are like, oh, the case is going down, but we already made our decision, and like it's like a fait accompli, and it's already over with, and people can move on with their lives. The waiting and just making people just kind of stand around, forcing Yale to have all those players like announce that they're in the school like voluntarily like opting out, like that kind of stuff. Like that's just horrible PR. So it's just a bad look.
As Ryan always says, Cornell's a hotel management school.
Remember, Cornell is a public-private and the land-grant school of New York State. Yes, New York's land-grant school is Cornell University.
We'll always have Rogue Nation Cornell.
the best diss at Syracuse Cornell games that are always heated. You're a public school. That's what you get for not allowing us in the Ivy League.
Now that's just extreme snobbery at just the height of it. Going at someone for being a public university.
Nose in the air.
You're a public school. You make your school available to poor people.
Newhouse has a higher acceptance rate more difficult acceptance rate than Cornell. All right, but that's enough about that. Turn our attention to some not so great news out of Marquette this week. What do you know? Another issue in lacrosse dealing with racism. Hooray! Came out that a Marquette player on a Snapchat dropping hard R's. Repeatedly. And
not just once.
Remember, Snapchat, it's not live. You have to actually look at it before you post it, which
yes, you literally click send on a Snapchat. Like you make that or post. Like
it's not even a heated gamer moment. It's
not a stream, like you literally just make the decision consciously to like you go back and you watch what you say and then click post.
So
there is an editorial process before you click send.
So a sport that can't seem to stop spinning itself in the mud when it comes to progress on racial aspects. Once again, we have to have this freaking issue pop up because lacrosse players are too dumb to not realize the lesson of stop being racist. If you've learned anything in the past 9 months, it's don't do that.
Because
and unfortunately, we see that pop up again.
Because the sport isn't committed to it. Like, I don't know how much like it has to be said. Writing an article once a year, you know, or like doing some like really serious like YouTube video or interview or whatever with a black lacrosse player, you know, whatever it may be, that doesn't mean that you're committed to dealing with like racial inequality or racism in your sport. That's like not how it works. Like just be like, man, how do we get more, you know, black players or you know, Hispanic players to play lacrosse? Because it's you know, not just that as well. Or also needs to be mentioned. How do we get, you know, Native American players not, you know, victims of this stuff as well? Because they are too. Even though they're, you know, the most prominent minority in the sport, they do get, you know, we mentioned, or we saw what Tehoka Nanticoke mentioned back in the spring of, you know, or summer, of things he's had said to him, pardon me, during games. So, like, you gotta be about it, man. And I liked what Marquette, you know, I like that they sent out a statement. I like that they, you know, we publicly called for them to do that. That you can't just, a kid can't just get kicked off the team for racism just the same way he would for flunking a bunch of tests or getting in a bar fight or something like that. You know, it can't just be like, just drop him from the roster on the website, you know, and that's it. It has to be forceful. It has to be made clear, especially after we saw programs. You know, we saw programs say they were committed to this stuff in the summer when everything was going on, and they, you know, that was a big thing, and they sent out these statements. And so, if you're going to do that, you got to be about it. And Marquette did the right thing here. They kicked the guy off the team, and then they sent out a strong statement. Andrew Stimmel did, which was good. But like this stuff's got to keep. Every time this happens, that's got to keep happening, and this message has to be like constant. Like it has to just continually be ever present. And it's not in this sport. It comes up when you know, it comes up when something bad happens. Like that's the best way I can say it. It just comes up when something bad happens. And that's I'm not saying like to ignore the issue that like, oh, something bad happened, let's just not talk about it. I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's got to be something that's present more often, and the conversation has to be held more often. And that's the only way you get to the root of it. Otherwise, if you're only talking about it when something bad happens, well, then guess what? All any black or other minority young lacrosse players see, or people who maybe are interested in getting into lacrosse see, is that you just talking about this stuff when something bad happens. And that's not going to encourage them, you know, to want to play the sport more. So it's like, I just think the sport views it as like how do we get people in, and not enough of a what's going wrong, like in it. You know, it's like it's always kind of focused on the how do we get more kids playing, how do we grow the game for these kids, and that's awesome. I'm not saying that's not, you know, a noble and worthwhile goal to have. I think it's an awesome goal to have, but it's like you gotta, you know, you also got to be focused on. There's still like black players. There's I think 2 or 3 black players on Marquette's team, which Andrew Stephen noted in the, you know, statement that like, hey, you know, we have black players on our team. So like, you also got to be focused on the kids who you've already gotten. You know, like there are already black players in the sport. There are, you know, like the stuff Jovan Miller, you know, mentioned a while back, you know, about what happened to him at like Syracuse. Jovan Miller's one of the most like well-known players out there. Like he's a big name in the sport, or you know, was during his, you know, kind of peak playing days at Syracuse and then professionally. Like you got to be focused on the ones that are in it right now too. It can't just be, you know, the ones who are, you know, the young kids that you're trying to get play. And of course that's important. That's, you know, a big thing that you should want. But you got to be focused on making it more equitable for the players who are already playing. As well, and I think that's how. And again, you gotta have these discussions more. But it feels like I guess happened to Virginia Tech like 2 years ago, and I don't think we talked about it again until kind of the summer when everything happened the way it did then. and then now when we talk about it again, and it's like 3 conversations in like 2 years ain't gonna cut it. And I'm not saying like, I'm not saying like we need to make like every Friday, let's talk about how to solve racism in lacrosse. Like I'm not saying like, it's got to be like some community meeting or something, but it's just got to be a conversation that's had throughout, and it's got to be something that's just kind of brought up reoccurringly, and then made clear. And it has to be a more open kind of environment for players to say if something has, happened, or it's got to be open if something like this happens. I mean, this isn't the worst thing we've seen. Like it's really bad, and I'm sure it didn't feel great for the players, on with that player and teammate. But it's not the same as a player being, racially abused in a game or something like that, which we've seen happen, or by a coach, which we've seen happen. That stuff is a lot worse. Not to diminish this at all. So that's my piece. I know I kind of took up a lot of time, so I'll let you guys share yours. But yeah, that's kind of my feelings on it.
No, I agree with everything you said, Jake. I guess I'll first start off. Obviously, I didn't play lacrosse when I was younger, so I don't have any firsthand experience of ugly instances that I'm sure many African American, Hispanic, and Native American, and any minority player may have encountered. So I definitely empathize with anybody who had those kind of ugly experiences, and that that sucks. I'm sure. I definitely feel sorry for any uh, people of color on Marquette's team, just because this kind of incident like puts you in the kind of the spotlight and uncomfortable position. I feel sorry for all the players who didn't do anything. They weren't in the video. Like, who did nothing wrong. They were just, they got their game canceled against Cleveland State, and they were just looking forward, to and then this thing just like hits the program. I feel really bad for Coach Stimmel, who seems like a great guy. I guarantee that kind of behavior is not tolerated when he was at Yale, and I'm sure he carried that over to Marquette. And I feel bad for Marquette University having to go through this again. I mean, they did the right thing uh, with addressing this quickly and swiftly, but like, this is the second lacrosse player, not male, but in the summer, right? There was an admitted student, and she got caught in a video and type of thing, and they rescinded her admission. So like, you kind of think like, if that had happened within a year, like that would have been enough of a hazardous story that no one would do something similar within a year. So having it happen again in this type of situation is really bad. And the way we said, like, with Snapchat, like, you're kind of making a confirmation that you definitely want to do this, so there was time to think about it. They saw it and they're like, yep, let's go. And like, that was a horrible decision. And the player got kicked off the team. I'm not trying to put his name out there and stuff. I'm sure it's going through enough, but I hope that he learns from it, and the female student that was in the video as well, like, she learns from it as well, and they just grow from this incident. Like, I will have some humility and say I'm thankful that I didn't go through college with ever-present social media, that anything I ever did that was regretful was documented and instantly shareable with everybody in the world. And I can't, it's horrible to go to school at this time with that always hanging over you. So I'm modest enough, and I understand what my mistakes that I had in the past, to not just go full bore and just like dunk on this kid. What he did was ugly. It was unfortunate, and he shouldn't have done it. And it's a shame. He brought shame and disrespect to his program, to his university, to his family. I'm sure his family probably doesn't condone that kind of stuff. And it sucks. He's got to eat it, and you got to live through it and grow from it. And but like I said, I'm humble enough to say, people make mistakes. I hope he grows from it. And that I hope the sport, just you got it right on the money, Jake. You said people are like, oh, how do we get players in the game? And it's just like, why don't we think about like why aren't they already here? Because like besides money and all
There
that
you go.
stuff,
Nail on the head.
it's like so like like there's opportunities. There's plenty of middle class black and upper middle class and wealthy black families that could afford lacrosse. Why aren't they playing it right now? It's this question that you should maybe ask instead of like, oh, how do we get them in here? We're like, well, maybe they are wanting to go in, and there's something that's stopping them right now, and maybe this is one of those things. So,
it's been around for a while, like the sport didn't just start yesterday.
Exactly. So like,
the both of you make some. Yeah, the both of you make some really great points. And I think just to add on, it's, having the conversations, not just at the college level, but I think
that's a great point.
You want to start this as the youth and the club level. You want to start this at, because you see a lot of different experiences from lacrosse players of color. A lot of this they experience at a young age, at the middle school level, at the high school level, club games, youth games. You got to nail that down right at the beginning to say, you can't do this. It's absolutely wrong. If you instill that culture early on, I think you're going to have a much more inclusive lacrosse environment, because if you can clamp down at that at an early level, you're going to see less of this at a higher level. And you're going to start to see the sport in general be a lot more welcoming, where if I'm an African-American or a Black or Hispanic parent that wants my kid to play lacrosse, I'm not hearing kids, calling them racial slurs. I'm not hearing, other parents saying terrible things based on race or ethnicity in the stands at these things. So I think if we have these conversations going on as low as a level as possible, I think that definitely instills a much more welcoming environment for the sport in general.
Yeah, I think it's, the environment's a good point. Like it's not just, like slurs, like it doesn't have to just be someone calls you something for you to not feel welcome on, a team. I think like the University of Iowa was a good example. And I'm not saying I have a first-hand example or account of this happening in lacrosse, but like at Iowa, they mentioned that, the football program, the black players just felt like they were, anytime they did something that was an expression for themselves that was different to how, the white players at Iowa tended to act, they felt they were, punished for it, or they were belittled for it, or it was, they were it was trying to be stomped out, and they were expected to assimilate, try to use a nice, collegiate level word, into the kind of culture that Iowa had. And that's how, the strength coach, the guy who Urban Meyer just tried to hire for the Jacks, had to quickly, pull that back after like 2 days. That's like he got
Urban Meyer's back, baby.
I don't think it wasn't because he said anything necessarily of like he used a slur or a derogatory term or anything. It was just that they felt like they were being targeted out specifically, and that it was like their culture, anything they wanted to wear, or how they wanted to kind of express themselves. It was just kind of stomped on until it's like, either you stop this or you get out of here. And I'm not saying that I don't have, I didn't play lacrosse at a young age either, so I don't like have an example of this or personally, or that I've seen it in a college program. But that's another, or at the youth level, I think that's another way too, that when you have players who are of predominantly one group, the way they act and their kind of team environment is probably going to be very much like that. And you have to be, and there are some programs that we see that do seem to be committed to doing a really good job with that, and they seem to be the programs that are most consistently at the forefront of bringing these things up. But I'm sure there's some, like I think the Jovan Miller Syracuse example. I'm not saying Syracuse is still like this, or that they've always been like this, but I think his thing was that he just kind of mentioned the feeling of like just kind of an insecurity of how he was being treated compared to his teammates, and he was one of I believe at that time one of the few black players. I don't know if he was the only one, but there weren't many, because there just aren't on teams. Even at the most case you get, it feels like about 4 or 5 during that time. So I think that's another thing. It doesn't always have to manifest itself in terms of like calling you the N-word or calling you some other term. It doesn't always have to be. It's about as Ryan mentioned, with being inclusive and just letting everyone kind of be themselves. And that's the whole point of team sports. Like it's the whole reason you have them, is for expression, to guys to be themselves in an environment with other players and people of other backgrounds. I mean, it feels like you hear that kind of thing about that's why people love sports, is to get people of, different environments coming together in a way that maybe they wouldn't in other spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take away from Ryan if you were going to say something, but I just want to, again, just say categorically, we're against, any racial, like, slurs, anything racist. As a Black person, I don't think I have to, explain myself, like, having to go through racist something in America, but it's like, yeah, we're against racism and as a general rule here at College Crossecast. But I think this is a valuable lesson to learn, to remind us that, like, it doesn't take a million times to mess up to really, like, kind of, like, really negatively affect your life. And it's just like, it's unfortunate that just one mistake gets polarized and you essentially kind of, but in this kind of environment, get remembered for your worst moment in life. But yet, like, you should always be mindful, especially with social media. Like think before you post. Like, I'm saying, hey, yeah, don't have those type of things, and don't say that in your general life. But like, for the love of God, do not post it on social media, especially as like then you're screwing over your friends, your teammates, anybody associated with you, because, like, especially if you're on a team like that, like, everyone just kind of associates that incident with the team, and there's 45, 50 other players who had nothing to do with that video. And, like, now they're, may have to answer for that. And Simmel had to, get on camera and, address it. And he did it appropriately, and I commend him for that. But I'm just saying, like, you're putting people in an extremely difficult position by essentially, like, a pretty selfish act. Like, I want to be like an edgelord, and let me put this up there. And look what happened. You're out of school, and your friends are, like, having to, address it because of what you did. So.
All right, I think we all had a good deep discussion on that. I think it's time to kind of turn the mood of this podcast around. It's been a little depressing with this. We're talking about the Ivy League situation. We're talking about
none of this is fun, but it does have to be.
Yeah, it's important.
Discussed, because it's not often. It's easy just to talk about the games, but sometimes you gotta take your medicine, as we
but
say. And yeah,
let's have a
now we can turn.
We're gonna have a little fun now, though, and we'll start with this week's High Point UNC game. First off, I want to make a controversial statement.
Oh, I love Hot Take Ryan.
Welcome back.
The retro lacrosse jerseys with the mesh holes, they're better than the sleeveless crap Nike has, but it still ain't good. I am not a fan of mesh hole lacrosse jerseys. Sorry, lacrosse Twitter.
Yeah, it's kind of staking yourself out there. That's the mesh hole jerseys are very popular in lacrosse right now. Yes, they are certainly better than sleeveless, literally just because everything is better than sleeveless.
And I guess they're better than the Adidas cuts. Like Adidas, they can make a great hockey jersey,
and those
make a good lacrosse jersey.
Those are yikes. Like Rutgers, I think Ryan has had. Those are not good. I like them. I don't.
But yeah, I'm not a fan of mesh hole jerseys. But High Point, who wore them, looked pretty good in defeat against UNC. An exciting game on what was that, Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. But UNC holds on for the win in that one. They didn't quite get to 45 goals like some polls on Twitter were throwing around, but it was still an entertaining.
Snarky Ryan.
17 to 15 game, I think that was.
Yeah. Oh, one more uniform. Since we're on it, the dark blue Carolina shorts, they just do not do it for me. Like, you don't see the basketball team wear, like dark blue shorts like that. When they're on, I think at home, they wear all white, and then when they're on the road, they wear the. Someone corrected me to say it's Carolina blue, not baby blue, and I'm just like, okay, but like that's what they do, and like that's what looks good, man. Or on conversely, the Carolina blue with white on the road as well. Like the dark blue shorts just for Carolina just do not. They don't go together, because the numbers on the jersey are in Carolina blue. Yeah, they're in light blue. So you kind of get you're looking for that kind of for the shorts, and then they just hit you with like sometimes it even looks like black, and it's just even though I know it's navy blue, and it just doesn't do it for me. So that's my take. Go to all white. That's what I'm looking for. Or when you're on the
Carolina
road,
blue shorts.
Carolina blue. Yeah, or you could do that as well. I think that would be. I don't know if I've ever seen them wear that, but I think that would look better than what they were. So that's just my uniform pick. But yeah, as for the game, it was a good game. Like it really was. It was a heck of a game for a Tuesday afternoon. And I think it was a great game for Safe's propaganda about getting rid of face-off.
I have a theory on why Safe has the face-off agenda.
He's had it for a long time, so you're gonna have to go.
He's had it for a long time, but I think I finally put it together.
Go ahead.
It's because certain ACC, Big East, and Ivy League programs generally take advantage of face-off this inefficiencies, whereas they do not in the Big Ten. It's all connected. Wake up!
Look,
the Big Ten has a lot. The Big Ten has a lot of great face-off guys.
But it never,
as you both know,
a huge game. It doesn't really matter as much as it is when it's the other teams, like a Denver or Yale.
As you both know, I'm a big fan of transparency, and I'm always transparent about this. The face-off. It's contingent on how Hopkins does on the face-off that year. And in specific games, I when against Mount St. Mary's and stuff like that. When we're playing like Notre Dame and like a UVA, and like we're like losing like 2/3, 70%. I'm furious. Like you just see, like one of these days, you guys are coming up. Like when the numbers get really good, you guys are coming to Trenton. We're watching a weekend together, and if it's a bad face-off, I'm gonna like be like just out of pocket.
As time has gone on, I've slowly I think I just want to see a game without it, as like a social experiment. I just want to see a game that like doesn't have.
Maybe two of the Ivies could get together in there.
Yes, that'd be great. That would be awesome. That would be that we gotta commit to making that play a scrimmage, film it, just get one camera and don't have face-offs. And I would love
Franklin Field, Penn Cornell, and there's just no face-offs.
No face-offs. I would love to see that. I think that'd be. I just get curious with, and I don't. I'm kind of agnostic on it. Like I don't love it and I don't hate it necessarily. I do think it's kind of a unique thing that lacrosse has. That's interesting to its sport. Like people was like lacrosse is a lot like basketball in this way. Lacrosse is a lot like soccer in this way. I'm like, man, like you guys have your own sport. You can just say it's like lacrosse. You don't have to always like analogize it to some other sport. Like it is its own sport in a way. But yeah, man, High Point won 14% of faceoffs. They took 32 less shots than Carolina. They had 11 less possessions. They were more efficient on offense by 5%, and they. Me and Safe talked about it ourselves about High Point's defense. Man, if you hold Carolina to a 35% offensive efficiency day, I think you play pretty good defense.
Definitely.
This is by far Carolina's worst game, and not that they 35% is still pretty darn good. That's a good day at the office, but it's not like 40%, which was the top mark in the nation at the end of last year. I think Cornell was around there. Penn State was around 40%. That's generally where these kind of supercharged offenses go, and it wasn't the 47% Carolina was doing against Denver or the 44% they're doing against Jacksonville, or really what it was over 50% before they put the backups in, because they were just churning out over half their possessions they were scoring on. And yeah, High Point, that's what was compelling to me and why I'm really interested in seeing the rematch these teams have in a couple of weeks. Is High Point really competed with them in the middle of the field. Carolina won a lot of the ground ball battles, but the Carolina ride wasn't as big of a factor as it was against Denver or against Jacksonville, where it really felt like they turned a lot of the game. High Point generally dealt with it pretty well as the game went on. At High Point, they looked like they could compete with Carolina athletically. That's something I mentioned that I thought, against the Robert Morris game, I thought High Point had a lot of really great athletes. And that was, something that was just really intriguing that this game, I'm not saying that if the faceoffs were, anything can change in a game. I'm not saying that if, there were more, ultimately the possessions still wound up. Carolina had decided edge 11 possessions is quite a bit, but it's not huge. It's not like this massive disparity. But that was the difference ultimately, I think, in the game, because I think High Point played just as well as Carolina. Aside from that second quarter, really, when you really look at it, because High Point outscored them 5-3 in the first, they outscored them 6-4 in the third, and they were 2 apiece in the second. It was that second quarter where Carolina just completely dominated it, and then Carolina won 5. There were 5 faceoffs in the fourth quarter, and Carolina won all of them. And so High Point couldn't string together, kind of those possessions in that way. So yeah, I thought High Point's just their ability to compete with Carolina and not kind of get. And when Carolina went on that big run, they exploded and they went up 15-8 or whatever. High Point came back into it and they got some stops, and they were able to, really kind of, they moved the ball really well. And, they ran their offense effectively. They were able to kind of impose their will a bit on Carolina, and I thought that was hugely impressive. And Asher Nolting, man, I said Asher Nolting he's got Matt Rambo vibes. Like, he really does. And it's not just the kind of similar build or frame. It's the way that, like, you slide to him or you even give him a hint that you're coming off your guy. Boom, that ball is right in there. Like, that he can dictate a game so well with anyone kind of sliding to him or extending, especially from that kind of goal line extended, area. The way Rambo did it, especially that. I always think, not to give Safe nightmares, but the Hopkins game in 2017 was the best example I always go to, when they kept, like, they would come a bit and then he just throw it over their head and someone would score. He went to Connor Kelly like 4 or 5 times, and Knowlton went to not Kevin Rogers, who did have a great game, 3-2, but Brandon Maea, who had 5 goals. But Knowlton, certainly, he's really stamped his 9 points. Sheesh. And then he's really stamped his claim as being one of the top attackmen in the country. It was a bit quiet, last year when he came in with a lot of hype after 2019, but now he's kind of reasserted himself, and is such a fun player to watch.
I think this was just, I didn't get to watch too much of it, obviously, because ACC Network, but also while I was at work, but like reviewing it and talking to you guys afterwards, this is a good example of, for both cases, like North Carolina, despite like dominating on the stats, like they were able to like pull out like a pretty gutsy win. And for teams who are going up against, especially that one save at the end was amazing. The teams are going up against North Carolina. Like, this is like a template of how you can at least compete with them. You got to weather the storm. Carolina went on a 9-1 run after being down 6-4, and right, it was 6-4. 6-4, and 11-1 run to go up 15-7. So like. Just say that sentence out loud and just think to yourself like that's what you're going to have to like weather and like be ready to face. And as we joked around, like DM's defense is something of a bygone era. Like, you have to just assume we have to score at 15, 16, 17 plus to be on, and like whatever they're doing, we have to just continue to keep scoring. And shout out to High Point. Like, they were like 60% on shots on goal. Like, they didn't have as many opportunities because they were North Carolina dominating faceoffs and did really well on ground balls. And so they had like a 2-1 shots advantage. But like, when they got their shots and when they got their shots on goal, they made the most of it. And that's what you have to do with Carolina. You're not going to get as many punches as them because they're just bigger and faster than a lot of teams. But like, when you have that opportunity, you have to score. Your big guy has to have a big game, as Asher did. Your second or third players have also to have like major games, and like, you just have to like play until just keep scoring. Just never stop scoring. Don't think about like possession of the ball. Just like, your goal is to score and just to like hopefully like outscore North Carolina, and that's how I think you're going to beat them. So if they can be beat.
Sif, you made a point there that I think is kind of eliminating. Carolina is fast. Like, their speed is hugely evident. That's what they do. They're so fast. And their midfield is, I mean, that midfield, Cook, Perry, and Anderson, those dudes are just monsters. But they aren't, other than that, at the midfield, they're not particularly big. Like, they're not imposing, I think. And I think that's something that High Point had. High Point's a big team. Like, they got some big guys. And I think that's a way that they could, maybe another thing to look for, a way they matched up is the High Point had some, they were physically imposing. They were big dudes. And Carolina's not big in that kind of same way. The way I think of, the Yale teams of the last couple of years are always the great Maryland teams, where, or kind of Syracuse as well, where they are like, so those like, wow, like you watch them get off the bus, it's like, crap, these are big dudes. I don't think Carolina strikes in that way. They do beat you is they're relentless. I mean, they are utterly relentless. They can go forever and ever, but and they make you play like that. That's what Safe was getting at. Like, they make you play their game. Like, you have to. Yeah. There is no slowing the game down against them. You cannot do that.
What you guys have talked about on the DMs, like the clearing. Like, Carolina had a bad clearing game, and it was because like. You have to be aggressive at all times. It's 40 minutes of hell, like Arkansas used to do. That's how Carolina plays. You have to bring hell back at them, like if you're going to beat them.
Yeah, and I think this weekend's going to be a very interesting thing with Richmond's pace of play. Richmond's a much slower team. Are they going to be able to dictate the pace at all, or are they going to get the doors knocked out of them? So that's going to be something that's going to be very intriguing, because if Richmond's successful in doing it, you've provided a blueprint on how to slow this UNC team down. If they don't, though, that's going to be bad news for everybody else. I think.
Like, we'll see. Like, I think that's a good point. We'll see if Richmond is able to be successful at it. But I think the way to a safe match, I think the way to get at them and beat them is to get back at them, is to give them a taste of their own medicine. Go take it out to them.
The shot clock removes the ability to like possess the ball and like control the pace and like suffocate the high octane offense. Because eventually, you're going to have to shoot, and if you don't have an efficient offense, they're going to make the save, and then they're going to be on offense. And whether or not you have a great face-off day, like Carolina's going to get their shots, and a lot of them are going to go in. Whether it's not going to be 50% like they have been in the first two games, or 1/3 like this game here, they're going to score like 15 to 17 points. They went on an 11-1 run. Like, that's like 11-1. Like, that's like more points than some teams score like in an entire game. And they did it. And they won by 2. And they did that like in a quarter and a half. They didn't even do it like in the entire first half. That's how good they are. And like, you're gonna have to 2 quarters. But like, the main point is like they half a game they scored like what most teams score in a game.
Well, yeah, because I think it's fascinating to look at. Their first quarter, they had 12 possessions and they scored 3 goals. Their fourth quarter, they had 2 possessions and they scored 9 goals. But in the second and third quarters, they had 26 possessions and scored 12 goals. Yes. Like, that's what happened. Like, the run is going to come, but it's how are you prepared to weather it? And I think that's something that could be interesting to look at is, like, if you can get at them, if you can match up with them physically, if you've got both the size and the speed, and there are teams out there who I think have got that. I think Maryland's got it. I think Cuse has it. It's just a matter of whether they have the bodies, kind of the elite level offensive guys, the way Carolina does. Cuse has the physicality element to it. They play a bunch of dudes. It's just a question of do they have, and we'll see. This will be a good first chance for Cuse to kind of answer that question. I don't know if they just have the elite dudes that Carolina has. I mean, Gray did his, as Save says, he got to 7. As always. Tanner Cook had 5 points. Jacob Kelly, like, their fourth attackman, scored a hat trick. Like, it's preposterous. And that midfield had 10 points. The first midfield between the 3 of them. But yeah, if you kind of give them a taste of their medicine, I think that's the antidote to beating them. So yeah, that's also the thing. I kind of go off you safe with defense being a bygone era. I pose this question out there. I think the era of the shutdown defenseman is really just like dead. Like Will Bowen might be the best defenseman in America, and Will Bowen got beat several times by Nolting. Like 1-on-1, Nolting just physically got by him and scored. And he dropped 9 points on him. Not all of them were just on Bowen. Some of the, Bowen was defending and Knowlton got assists, but he still beat him to the cage. And it's like this air, like people are looking for, where's Johnny Surdick? Where's a Tim Muller? Where's these kinds of guys? Like, I don't think that exists. Like, I don't think they're the best defenseman now. Like, why is Bull Bowen maybe the best? Because that dude in the open field is a freaking freight train. Like, he's just,
oh my God.
He wins every ground ball, and when he's pushing the pace, it's frightening what he can do. Gibson Smith at Georgetown is similar. Great guy off the the ground. That's kind of when I look at these. JT Giles Harris is not quite the same, but he's an athlete, in terms of his abilities, and I think that's what you're looking at in terms of these best defensemen. It's offense is winning. Like maybe it'll change back. Like maybe as we get into the shot clock, teams will find a way to, kind of slow the tide down. But it's at the moment, it's like the kings of the previous era, the king of the Stahl era, for lack of a better term, and then the Timeron era was Maryland. Like they made their living on it. They dominated in a way no one else did. And right now, the questions people are asking Maryland aren't, are they going to slow the pace down? It's how are you guys going to pick the pace up? And they are. I mean, it's not like they haven't been successful with the shot clock. They've been pretty much just as successful as they were before. But it's like they're being forced to kind of change theirs. And we've seen Denver, and so far Denver seems to be having trouble with it. Hopkins did as well with, it's probably why Dave Petchman, one of the reasons he lost his job. It's therefore teams are being forced to change because of the shot clock. Teams aren't, changing the shot clock, at least yet, to their, liking.
All right, so that turns our attention then to this weekend, and we got a lot of teams starting to enter the fray. The Big Ten starts. Georgetown and Syracuse have their first games. Navy with their first game. A lot of different teams starting to enter the fray this weekend. And we'll start off with the Big Ten lineup because we got some good games with that. Michigan, Maryland.
Yes, we will, Ryan.
We'll
start with the best.
Ohio State, Hopkins, and
the People's Conference. The People's Conference.
Well, if we go in order, the Big Ten has the two of the three nooner games, so it actually even going in order makes sense. But yeah, Ohio State, Johns Hopkins, and Penn State, Rutgers. By the way, do you know which channel Ohio State, Johns Hopkins is on? Safe?
Is it on TV? Is it available this week? I didn't know. I think it's ESPN3 if I'm not mistaken. Yes, ESPN3.
Oh wow, I thought it would be on BTN Plus.
No, I thought it was a Big Ten network for a little while.
It's a Hopkins home game.
I know that it's.
Oh, you're doing the that was a good bit. Like that. The idea that you can be a lacrosse fan in 2021 and not be and not just be completely just knee deep in the game. They're there's no casual fan who's just running around on Twitter I'm gonna check out a lacrosse game this week.
if you know a Hopkins versus Ohio State game is coming up this weekend, you know where it's going to be.
So, but hey, this might be where Hopkins lost the exclusive ESPN deal.
No, they've. Oh, yeah.
I know it isn't.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Though, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many games they get on. I don't know. I need some ESPN. This quasi we're kind of ESPNU lacrosse, but we're also just ACC network lacrosse. These broadcasts are killing me. It's either get knee deep with the just go full on propaganda, or actually try and be a neutral broadcast, because they're trying to straddle the line is getting.
Yeah. After watching so many years of Syracuse non-con football games on BTN, just go full propaganda when it's on ACC network.
Yeah, the Big Ten network is not trying to make any bones about it. They're airing Big Ten games, Yeah,
but there's absolute propaganda machine. There's SEC network. Yeah, SEC network, absolute propaganda machine. Even with the ESPN personalities, still a full-blown propaganda machine with SEC programs. Just do the same thing.
They're trying to be, presenting themselves as taking a view of the whole sport, while simultaneously saying 3 times a quarter that the ACC could get 5 teams to the Final Four, and that the Big Ten is committing a moral crime of the century for only playing conference games. Like it's getting a bit like, gotta pick a lane, fellas. But yeah, I think one, I will say this, and I'm sure Safe will echo me, and I think Ryan will echo as well. The first week should have been rivalry week. Like it should have been Maryland Hopkins. It should have been Ohio State, Michigan.
Started off. Oh yeah, after 300 days of no lacrosse, yeah.
And you're not like, can you imagine if you had given Maryland Hopkins week freaking 1? Like
But even it also makes sense, not only on an entertainment value, but on a COVID safety level too.
Yeah, like the earlier games, as things when things get better, you can start to branch out. And especially with the weather too. Like, thankfully, fingers crossed, it looks like everything's good. The weather's cleared up last year. But yesterday we were when we got a lot of snow yesterday, and like I couldn't leave my house around here, and it looked like we were gonna get more. It was like, man, is Ohio State and Michigan gonna be able to travel in? Are these games gonna be able to happen? Because, God, can you imagine like waiting all this time and getting through COVID and everything and passing tests, and no, sorry, the weather kept you from playing? That'd be a trip. But yeah, I think it should have been Maryland Hopkins, Rutgers, Penn State. I know that's not a rivalry, but it's they're geographically the closest than Ohio State, Michigan. They've had some fun games, so I think that should have been it. But I think they still created some. I think Rutgers, Penn State's an intriguing matchup. Rutgers fans have got a lot of hope and a lot of optimism, and there's some real excitement behind this team. And I'm not saying I don't get it. Connor Kearse, you bring him in, you've got the best midfielder in America, in my view. An offensive guy who's a beast, but also can do a lot on the ground and defensively. He's awesome. You get Charlon Beatties and Mullins for one last ride. It's going to be I hope Adam's able to go out with an awesome year. I think, on the one hand, is it crazy being in college for, like 6 years at this point? Yeah. But on the other hand, that guy's just been through so much that I'd love. And Mullins, even though he's been in college a long time, Garrett Bullitt, they've got some, as we've kind of talked about, could being old be helpful this year. Rutgers just got dudes who are a long way away from high school. That was a long time. So I think that could help them. And yeah, I hope those guys are able to, I'd love to see it. I think Rutgers has been a great team to watch, and they've played in so many fun games. And I mean, look,
they're so snake bit all the time.
Yeah, like if you're asking me for the best games, like of Sunday night BTN, it always feels like it's a Rutgers game. The Hopkins Rutgers game with the shot clock that did it expire. I remember a Maryland game back in 2015, the first year where Rambo had a game.
Fights. The fights, the stare down. Oh my God, like Ohio State, just a drama star.
But then you've got I remember the Maryland Rutgers game but that if you could distill Rutgers lacrosse over the last 5 years into one game, it was when Maryland, playing their third game in like 7 days, beat them in triple overtime on a Sunday night, which was a classic game. But that was Rutgers' entire experience distilled into one game. Maryland was out on their feet and still.
There's so many. The end of the season victory over Ohio State that still wasn't enough to. I think it was 2017 in that game.
Yes, they beat national finalist Ohio State, and it's still.
Yeah, it's number one at the time or close to it, and so snake bit, but
So yeah,
I can't wait for.
I would love to see them have a great team. I'd love to see them, but I don't know. I'm not saying that I don't think they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to be a good team, but I want to see the proof really that they're as loaded as a Maryland and a Penn State, and they get Penn State, week 1. I know they've got the guys on the offensive side of the ball, but still this was a team, and they were a close 2-4. They should have beaten Loyola. They should have beaten Stony Brook. They were in it with Princeton before Sowers just decided he was gonna, just gonna do his thing. But they gotta find a way to figure out, the face-offs. And if you haven't figured it out week 1, here's Jerry Arceri for you. Week 1. That ain't gonna be any fun. Goalie play was okay a year ago with Steven Russo. It wasn't bad, but it's got to be, I think a twinge better. I think around 52, 53%. So, yeah, I think that's a really compelling matchup in terms of seeing if Rutgers is kind of where we think they're at. And then from the Penn State side of things, like what does it look like without Grant Ament? Like the last time we saw Penn State without Grant Ament, they won in the NCAA tournament. When they've had before the year before Grant Ament got there, they won in the NCAA tournament. When Penn State's been number one, I believe, 3 times in 3 seasons in their history as a program. I believe it's 2017, 2019, and last year in 2020. They've been number one. Who's the common denominator? Grant Ament. Like that's people forget they got to number one in 2017. When they feel I think 3 or 4 Big Ten teams got to number one that year. Who got them there that one time? It was Grant Ament. And I think they had Nick Spillane that year too. They had some great guys, but now you get life without him. And Mac O'Keefe was named preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. 2 Maryland guys might have something to say about that. We'll see if he's able to have another monster year. I think they're a great team. I've got them in the top 6, but are they a top 5 team in the country? I think we'll see. And then Hopkins Ohio State is, I think, the most a wide open game. I think that game could go in any different direction. There's so many questions. There's so many. Jamison Kester, former Ohio State assistant. Josh Kearson, former Ohio State goalie, transferring over. You get Hopkins with a new coach for the first time in 20 years. Hopkins hasn't really practiced. Feels like Hopkins could either get a massive statement win or get blown off the planet. And, like the wide dispersion of reactions you could get. And then I'm super excited to see, obviously, as a Maryland fan, I can't wait to see what this offense looks like. Because we've been watching, Carolina and the goals they've scored. We've seen Virginia and Duke. I think this Maryland offense has the potential to be as good as any of them. And so I'm super excited to finally see that in action. So, yeah, I'm pumped to get the Big Ten back, and I think the conference-only schedule provides a lot of intrigue going into this year.
I mean, I'm so excited for the Big Ten. I mean, obviously the ACC schools are great and stuff, but like being able to see games and not be discriminated against because of your cable provider, like listen, shout out to the People's Conference. But yeah, Jake hit everything on the rundown for this weekend. But it's a lot of great storylines. I mean, obviously, my beloved Petro is no longer at Hopkins, so you get to see the debut of Coach Peter Milliman. I think he actually has a good chance to have a good season. Like he did really well in his first year in Cornell after they were below 500 when the year before he took over. Hopkins does really well in their openers. I believe they're 17-3 the last 20, but this is much higher caliber opening opponent in Ohio State. Ohio State, we kind of love them, but we kind of wish to see something more since they're a great point.
I want to see it.
2017 run. Exactly. And we think the world of Ryan Terrafranco and what's looking at here. Sorry, forgive me. Just lost my screen. But then we just want to see them do a little bit better this year and become an actual winning the conference. It would be great. Maryland, I think they're going to be one of the teams that, despite us putting them in the top 3 and them being essentially top 5 in almost every other polls, are kind of being a little bit overlooked. And last time we really saw them, they got usurped by UVA, and then the season ended last year. So, and the defense wasn't as tight as you would expect from a Maryland squad, but they're bringing everybody back. You're going to get Jared and Logan running, the offense, and should have a really dynamic season. Obviously, Rutgers, I have a soft spot on them because of Jersey, but this is, I think, this has a bad boys for life kind of feel with Sharon B and Karen Mullen. One more round, let's go, and now they got Connor with them, and there's definitely a lot of optimism at Rutgers. I think really. Yeah, Rutgers hasn't really taken that next step, but they're right there, and it is really fun. Going to a Rutgers game, I'm sure Ryan some games in Ohio, in Long Island, and Jake maybe some high school games or college games in Maryland are equally boisterous. But like a Rutgers home game, it's amazing. That when Pat Spencer came in and they were literally like talking trash to him, like PTA moms in the stands, and Pat was like going back at them. It was great. It was a great atmosphere, and like you just really want to see them like get into the tournament and like really make a show. But aside from that, just really gonna like I said, happy to see games. And with Penn State is loaded, but like you can't like ignore the caveat that this is the first year without a Mint. The last time they didn't have a Mint, they didn't make the tournament. I thought that the 2018 season they were right there and they had a lot of games that they slipped through their hands, but they didn't make it happen. They're bringing a ton of talent, and our boy Mac O'Keefe is definitely a hitter, but like you can't ignore the fact that the role that a Mint played. So it's going to be interesting to see with them, and just really looking forward for the restart of Big Ten lacrosse.
I think one point on the Rutgers, kind of you mentioned with the home game, that used to be a fortress. They went like 3 or 4 years there, but they went like 20-2 at home games, and the only games they lost were they lost to Maryland in OT, and they lost to Hopkins at the buzzer basically, and that used to be a fortress, and that hasn't quite been the same the last couple of years. They've lost more home games. The Loyola one was they really got beat up on that one. And they felt like they got so close in 2016 and 2017, and even in 2018 as well. And they feel like they've backslidden a bit the last couple of years. But now they've got a good team. Yeah, there's a lot of good stories here with Charlie Bees and Mullins, the Kearse brothers. They're from New Jersey. I think their dad passed away recently, so they're going home. For one more year. So there are a lot of great stories I think with that team that I'd love to see. But it is definitely proven. Ohio, like if you're looking for a team. Like if you're looking for, and I know we'll get to another one, even if we're super high on them, we planted our flagpole in our preseason picks. If you're looking for a team outside the top 5 or on the top 10, they're like, who's that team that could go through to a Final Four? Ohio State's got all the pieces. Like they are there. Trey LeClaire is a beast. Jack Myers is a beast. Jackson Reed's awesome. Griffin Hughes is really good. I mean, they've got midfielders. Terefenko is as a short stick, but they've got tons of middies. They brought back a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball. Goalie will be a question. Kirsten was great a year ago. They got to find some answers in there as well. But I mean, you look at the team they beat Notre Dame at the end of a year ago. They put up they had some kind of big games, but they almost beat Cornell. It's just they're a team kind of like in the mold of Denver. Like, are we going to take the break off? Are we going to let them? Are we going to let that thing go? Because I think that's always I was really critical of them after that Cornell game, harshly so, maybe overly harsh you could say, but I watched them when they let it all go, and they just it's like when they fall behind and they're like, all right, crap, we just got to go, and it's like, holy crap, where's this been hiding? It's like when you see the guy like in the movie, like the the action hero in the movie who's playing in like living in this small house or apartment somewhere, and then he opens up the garage and he just breaks out the sports car, and it's like, whoa, where was that at? And it's like they've got that. I just want to see them let it out. But yeah, this was a program that broke through to the Final Four, and we kept saying, and I said that I think they're good. There's more on the horizon. I think they're gonna make more, and it's hard to make the Final Four, but they should have made more NCAA tournaments since 2017. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're a program that I'm looking at is like the pieces are all there. It's just a question of can they put it together? And there's no reason they can't.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a very interesting season again with them all playing one another and not having non-cons. So it's going to be interesting to see within that, not to use the term bubble because the past 12 months have changed around that term bubble around a lot, but kind of just that insular conference play where they're only playing one another and seeing how everyone matches up against one another. I think heading into the season, Maryland. It's probably the clear favorite, but that middle portion, the middle class of the Big Ten is going to be very interesting, even more so than it usually is, because it's just that the mix of players returning and things changing, there's not a lot that we really know outside of Maryland. Maryland's really the surefire thing we know in the Big Ten, and there's a lot of question marks about the middle class of the Big Ten. Are they going to be beating up on one another too much that it's going to hamper them, or is a team going to kind of rise above the fray because of the familiarity? With Hopkins, is the Millman era going to be able to go to a fast start, or is it going to be a continuation of last year's struggles, but in the process, instilling a new culture there that things are turning around even if the results aren't there? Can Rutgers take this opportunity to finally make that next step? It's going to be a very interesting year in the middle class of the Big Ten, I think, and that's something that I'm really going to be keeping an eye on as the season progresses. Because you have Maryland at the top, Michigan at the bottom, and who the heck knows in the middle.
I mean, even Michigan gets a feeling of, you look at some of the guys they have on their team. Even they've got to, look at, they got to we got to see some more from them too. I got to see Michigan get on, the board with some wins. That's going to be tough, but Josh Zawada broke out as a freshman. It looked awesome. Bryce Clay's got a, kind of young Rambo bit about him as, kind of that big body finisher type. They've got a lot, an experienced group in there as well. Even they, I think, will feel like they could, nab some wins, but they got to step up a bit. Safe, if you were going to make a point.
No, your point about almost like that true Ohio State hasn't been seen yet. Like the only times we've really seen peak Ohio State is 3 times in 2017. The Big Ten championship game, which will go down as arguably one of the greatest games of all time. The Duke game where they beat them in the
bullied them.
Absolutely, just bullied them off the field. And the Denver game that really kicked off that year. That they're here. And the Duke 2015 game again, 16-11.
They look like they when they get going, they look like holy crap. Like they're just they're athletic.
Those 2 tournament games, they were you thought Myers was the Dano killer. You thought he really showed me something. Those 2 in Durham both of those years.
They beat them up. They beat you up when they're good, and that's
it wasn't even
and that's what but they're skilled. They have so many skilled guys, and that's what I think. Yeah, they always leave you kind of wanting a bit more, and. Yeah, I think it's, how people look at the ACC and they see, oh my God, all these teams could make it to a Final Four. But then, I feel like I'm not saying that Penn State or Ohio State are as good as Carolina or as good as Virginia, but I think they could make Final Fours too. I think people are kind of I know that the middle class does have a lot of questions, but I could see Maryland I think Maryland's in that ACC tier. I really do, and I think that they can prove that as well. But I can see Penn State. I mean, I think Penn State and Ohio State are better than Notre Dame, but I think I don't think they're that far off. The Big Ten still got 3 teams in the top 8. There's still big notch teams here. That it feels like it's, and I know why it looks like Maryland versus the rest. Because you look at Maryland and it's that offense is. It's you're gonna put Griffin Brown utterly nuked Syracuse last year and a loss for Colgate. It was a loss, but he was just blowing by Nick Mellon every time. He dropped 7, I think, something goals on him in that opening game a year ago. Let me pull it up. But he was top 20 in the country in goals, or top 10 around there. He had 4 goals against Cuse on 10 shots. That dude's gonna draw a shorty this year. They're gonna that dude's gonna get a short stick. Anthony DeMeo, who's put up some of the best numbers on that team, he's gonna get a short stick. They have Eric Holden could potentially. We saw how well that dude slings the ball with Hobart. Another a game against a great Cuse team a year ago that he had a monster game against them. He could potentially never leave the field with his ability to shoot. From the midfield. He had 3 and 2 against Cuse a year ago. That dude's gonna be, there's no matchup against Maryland where you ever feel just secure. You're feeling insecure at every point, with the guys they have. So yeah, I think they're a class above. I do, and I think they might be the best team in the country, and we'll see. But yeah, Penn State and Ohio State, they're right there, and I think there's potential for Rutgers, maybe to break out, or Hopkins to be better than we anticipate.
All right, there's other very intriguing starts, not just in the Big Ten, but also in the Big East. We got Georgetown and Villanova kicking off their seasons this weekend, and you know that we're pretty high on the Hoyas here at College Cross, but Villanova got some excitement heading in too. So Big East play starts with a very intriguing game in the suburbs of Philly. So how do we think about both the Hoyas and the Wildcats heading into this season?
Jake Caraway, friend of the program. I can't wait to see Georgetown. I'm really, we've stuck our neck out there. So Jake, if you're listening, please deliver.
Drop 7, Jake.
But I think Caraway's one coach said it. He's a tour time guy. I'm not saying he's gonna win it, but if you're looking for a guy man, Chris Gray's putting up 7 points every game. Who's gonna man, Jake Caraway can put up numbers, man. I mean, that dude is a beast. They got tons of other dudes. Defense, if you're looking for a team that's closest to a good defensive team, I think Georgetown could be it. And I'm just, the schedule was what it was, and I'm not saying that the schedule was great or anything, or that they played great teams, but dude, they just obliterated people last year. 14, 6, 13, 7, 9, 12. I mean, they were nuking teams, and so how real is it? We'll see. Obviously, Villanova's a great first opponent, because Villanova usually is good for one upset a year. They've got some pieces. I am intrigued, though. Villanova. Oftentimes, Villanova can prove to be a tricky matchup for teams out of conference. But once they get in conference, the teams that know them, really well, that's where you kind of can see them sometimes start really well and then sort of fade once they get into conference play. Well, now they're playing a lot of conference games, but there's still some really good players on the Villanova team. So we'll see. Kind of Georgetown. We're waiting to see them against. I mean, the year got canceled. They were playing Carolina. That weekend. Would love to see that game. Would love to see that game this year. Not going to happen, or at least not in the regular season. Hopefully, we'll see if it can happen. Maybe the NCAA tournament. But yeah, they're just. I feel like I look at them with the offense. They've got the ability to keep up with that, but then that kind of defensive edge with guys like Gibby Smith, and then potentially great goaltending as well with Owen McElroy. They feel like the shark in the water team in the quarterfinal. That some team is gonna get one of those ACC teams, or maybe in Maryland, is gonna get Georgetown in the quarterfinal and be like, oh, this is the one team we didn't want to play. And I think that's kind of where I feel them, and we'll see. We put our flag down out there, and I think they can deliver, and I am super excited to see them.
The thing with Georgetown is it's not it was a 1-year fluke last year.
No.
They had a good run. Since the Hopkins loss in the tournament when they should have won. I mean, I remember that game distinctly. And it's just since that time, really Warren has just been on one. Just has his team really focused. And last year they were really hitting it, and they bring back pretty much all the major weapons. Shout out to Jake. And they had a great defense. We just accurately, in my opinion, pointed out defense is kind of a non-factor now. But Georgetown is kind of the team that kind of is the exception that proves the rule. Last year, they never got below, I think, 13, 14, and pretty much held every opponent to single digits. Which is still impressive, regardless of who they were playing, because in the shot clock era and teams are still going to get their shots. So to hold that many teams, I think they were the number one defensive efficient team according to the cross reference last year by a sizable amount.
They were number one. The best in adjusted efficiency was Georgetown. They were playing better than anyone. Whether you think they're the best team is a different question. But who was playing the best? Georgetown.
Exactly right, and that breeds confidence. And then they. We saw it 2 years in a row. They lost the Hopkins game and then the Yale game the next year, right?
Another great. I would have loved to see that game without faceoffs.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that's exactly what type of team. Like it's a team you don't want to play. If you see them in your bracket, if they have the kind of season we think they're going to have, and that you see them in the bracket, they're just a team that's like maybe doesn't get that much publicity because they're not in the ACC or Big Ten. But like Georgetown is a serious team, and like I think this may be the year. Like last year may have been it. Like where Warren really puts it together and makes a Final Four run, but they're bringing back pretty much everything that they had from last year, and they're just going to run it back. And if it's anything like Carolina, they should start off with a bang, like it's right where they left off last year.
Mm-hmm. Elsewhere this weekend, how about we're getting closer and closer to Saturday night lacrosse, boys. We got Saturday evening lacrosse. We got Duke and Towson.
Big Ten let me down a bit with the schedule, though. I do like the Maryland.
Yeah, they had 2 games at noon. Two games at noon.
But
at
I
the
do like
same
Maryland
time.
Penn State. Maryland Penn State is the happy hour game on Friday next week.
Yeah, but this weekend we have 2 4 o'clock games: Mount St. Mary's Navy and Duke Towson. Sadly, because of ordinances, Jake cannot hang out there, Johnny Unitas, with his press hat on or anything, unfortunately, but that's for another time. And we also have Virginia Loyola at 5. See if Virginia is able to keep on going with their high-powered offense against the Loyola team that eked out a gritty win against Richmond. And speaking of which, on Sunday, Richmond takes on UNC, as we said earlier in the show. That's going to be an interesting clash of styles. Can Richmond provide a bit of a blueprint to slow down UNC for some other teams? Or is UNC going to just completely run over them? That's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see. And also, if you're interested in rock fights, it's the annual Army-Syracuse. Syracuse wins 6-4 game at noon, where every Syracuse fan wants to throw something at their TV for 2 hours. Who knows? Maybe even Army wins that. But generally, that game is like passing a kidney stone, and that annual tradition starts at noon on Sunday.
Yeah, I think UNC Richmond. I don't know. I think we said our piece on Richmond last week. Gotta step it up, boys. I'm intrigued by Loyola, Virginia. I think I have a feeling like I don't know. I picked Loyola. I went with Loyola in the pick'em just because everyone else went with. We'll post our pick'em. You'll see it come up tomorrow. We can kind of maybe go through it here. I picked Loyola because everyone else picked Virginia, and I'm like, well, I'm currently tied for last place, so I got to make up, some ground somewhere. But I don't know. I feel like this could get ugly. I don't. Loyola wins. Bailey Savio's awesome on the faceoffs and at getting draws for Loyola key times. I mean, he won how many in a row to end that Richmond game to get them, back in it. But Virginia wins plenty of faceoffs themselves. And it just feels like, what does Loyola do well? Well, they're great on the ground, and they've got a lot of really good athletic defenders. And they don't really play offense well. Well, who's also great on the ground? Virginia. Who's also got a lot of really athletic defenders? Virginia. But what does Virginia do well? Score a bunch of goals. I don't know. I hope the Greyhounds get it done because I picked them. But yeah, I have just a feeling that one could get really ugly. I'm not saying Loyola won't get better, that maybe that won't necessarily be indicative of their whole season, but I'm still just not certain on the Hounds this year as far as, what we normally expect out of them. Like Loyola's gotten to the point where we don't judge them as kind of the Patriot League team. We judge them as the one team of the
national stature.
Yeah, they're, I don't want to say the black sheep, but like they're the member of the family that's kind of on the outskirts. In terms of the big.
They're the Oregon compared to the rest of the Pac-12.
The Villanova of the Big Five of the Philly basketball.
Well, no, yeah, but I mean like kind of the flip side of like when we think of these national, we think of Syracuse and the ACCs and the Big Tens, and then even Denver and Georgetown now to a degree. Loyola's the one who's kind of on they're all those teams are usually in the penthouse, and Loyola's they're not in the outhouse, but they're kind of in the nice mid-sized condo.
Now I'm trying to think of a college football equivalent. The Oklahoma State before Bedlam.
Loyola is just viewed differently, and there's greater expectation of them, and they've earned that. They won a national championship. They've been to Final Fours, so there's a greater expectation of them, and I don't know if they have that kind of feeling this year, and I didn't get assuaged by the Richmond win, even if it was gutty, and even if it was impressive with the guys they had out, and almost having like half the dudes on the bus couldn't make it to the game because the ice. I mean, a gutty win, but I'm just a bit worried is how I would put it. I feel like that game could get a bit ugly.
Shout out to my boy Kevin Lindley, finishing the game with a hat trick. Love you, KL. I hear what you're saying, Jake, and I think this is wise to be concerned. I'm not as high as a lot of people on UVA. Like I think I had them like fourth or fifth at the worst on my poll, but like I did have to relook it when you mentioned it that they got double the amount of first place votes as Syracuse and North Carolina, and essentially like 2 less first place votes than Syracuse, North Carolina, and Duke combined, which like it's kind of like, or it's not as bad as 6 to they got 12 to combine, and like Virginia got like 7, a little bit more half. So I mean I would put the Cavs as the number 1 team, especially with like the way Carolina's played this year. But like they have a chance to make it really ugly against Loyola. Like Richmond essentially gave up that game, an extremely winnable game in the fourth quarter, and Loyola probably were not for like their big run at the end, like may not have gotten. They went into the fourth quarter with 3 goals. Like that's not something that you look forward to when you're going against a team like UVA that can cause havoc in terms of clearing. They can score goals and punches, and they are extremely fast. Like you're not going to do well against a Clark Tiffany team if you're only getting 3 goals by the third quarter, and even 8 goals, including the overtime. So like that's just not really going to cut it. So like I hear you, and it was wise for you to say that this could get really ugly. They shout out to them. They gutted it out. And they won that, but again, it's a lot more of Richmond not finishing than Loyola really playing the solid game.
And I mean, just going back with
the interested in your Towson Tigers. Oh, sorry. No, please.
No, yeah, I'll look at Towson. Like just going back to the Loyola offense, I mentioned how like they were in terms of like the top 20 teams, they just had the worst offense. I mean, they were 24% of offensive efficiency a year ago, which is not good. And they're at 20. They were 22.5% against Richmond. Again, all numbers courtesy of the cross reference. Anytime we cite kind of the efficiency numbers, anything like that, they're always where we're getting them from. But yeah, man, like it wasn't the offense didn't look any better. Is kind of the feeling I have. And obviously they had. I know like it was the first game and. First games are tough, and it was cold, and there's a lot. But it's just all the kind of question marks I had. Yeah, I didn't see them get assuaged, especially on that offensive side of the ball. And the things that kind of help them overcome that, I'm not sure they show up against UVA. But I need a way to, like Ryan's like 6-2 and pick him, and he's beat me, and I always make fun of Ryan. So I gotta get a comeback somewhere. Towson, yeah, I'm not. I'm not saying I'm confident, but I. Like if you told me Towson was playing UNC this week, I'd be like, oh Jesus Christ! But like looking at Duke, like it's still kind of a work in progress, and still kind of working through they're not bringing the North Carolina you're getting the sound and the fury, and it's Duke you're getting the sound and you're getting and it's gonna be tough, but they're not quite feel like they're operating on peak sort of efficiency, and they're not the kind of up tempo kind of havoc creators like that. I feel like especially with Virginia, just the havoc that Virginia was bringing in. I think Duke is kind of more of maybe a slowed down game, more of a bit of a slower pace that could kind of work to Towson's advantage a bit. I don't expect Towson to win this game. I expect Duke will probably win going away, but I do kind of feel like it's a game that might suit Towson a bit as maybe being more competitive for a half or maybe in the third quarter, more so than the Virginia game would have been. or versus a team like UNC. They got a big win, and hopefully they look, the defense can kind of continue to show us progress. But I think the defense will probably be good in the long haul, but it's continuing the St. Joe's win. They needed a win, and they needed especially win over a good. They need any win, and win over a good team like St. Joe's was big. But you still got the offense is still the main question, and I still do got to see some more from there. But yeah, I'm not as, for playing a Big Ten ACC team, I'm not as like, oh geez, like I would be if it was UNC or when it was UVA week 1.
Mm-hmm. We also do have a Saturday night lacrosse game courtesy of Mercer and Jacksonville at 6.
Evening,
yes. We're very close tonight.
Night is
we're almost
7. Evening is 6.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Getting close.
Other games to keep an eye out. Noon on Saturday, Bryant at Stony Brook. Both had some pretty good wins last week, so that will be interesting to see. Bryant's got a bit more of the deliberate pace, whereas Stony Brook was firing on all cylinders, so that could be a fun clash of styles in that one. Can Mount St. Mary's continue their positive momentum after their win against Delaware? They'll play Navy at 4. Utah Air Force in the afternoon as well. Could be a little interesting. Utah was looking pretty good against Denver. And Robert Morris Colgate on Sunday morning at 11 could be interesting to see as well. Robert Morris had the loss last week to High Point, but they have another shot at a good victory against Colgate playing their first game of the season. And don't sleep on the Big East matchup between Providence and St. John's at 1 either on Sunday. Even though Providence had that close loss to Bryant, St. John's coming off that overtime victory against Hofstra. That could be important for Big East positioning. So quite a few games to look out for.
Yeah, Big East is kind of a mini Big Ten this year. They're playing some non-con games, but it is, kind of similar to the Big Ten where it's a heavy conference schedule. So that could be kind of like the Big Ten in terms of the familiarity of, those teams are going to be playing each other quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to run through the pick'em before we close up?
Yeah, and then we'll just we're going to guide you to another podcast if you haven't listened to it already as well. But yeah, for this week's pick'em, we'll have the graphic go up on Saturday morning for it. Right now, the leaders are Adam and I at 6-2. Safe's just behind at 5-3. Jake and Chris are at 4-4. We try our best to adhere to the Jason Kirk rule, where we try to not have unanimous picks, so we don't have Twitter accounts dunk on us.
I thank you for saying that and shielding me from the army of Syracuse fans who would be ready to burn down my house for being the only one who didn't pick the orange.
So, as I popped up for our YouTube viewers, Virginia Loyola. Almost all Virginia. Jake, you have Loyola. Penn State Rutgers is our biggest split. Jake and I and Chris at Penn State. Safe and Adam are going with Rutgers.
Jersey boys.
Ohio State Johns Hopkins. Safe the only Hopkins homer there. Adams joined the rest of us picking Ohio State.
Let's go.
Army Syracuse, as Jake said, Jake's the only one picking Army. I was contemplating Army, being the pessimistic Syracuse fan that I am, but then I went realist Syracuse fan. It's always a way too close game, but 9 times out of 10 Syracuse wins by 2. So I'll go with Syracuse. And if you are running the Villanova and Richmond social media accounts, please do not listen to this portion in case you guys win, because we're going unanimous Georgetown and UNC in victories in those games.
I mean, if besides the UVA pick for me, if that's not a safe slate of teams for pick'em, like it never will be. Rutgers, Hopkins, Cuse, Georgetown, and my beloved North Carolina Tar Heels.
It's a bit of a close but clear. Like I could see a lot of these games being close, but it does feel like a kind of close but clear weekend. But I hope we get some upsets. It'd be fun to get some. I feel these look like good games, but I'd love to see some upset or two in there. I guess I don't know if they're upsets. As we always say with kind of our upset special. Top 20 team being a top 20 team is not an upset.
Exactly.
I would, yeah. I think Villanova maybe get in there as much as we're high on the Hoyas, or Loyola bringing a surprise. Penn State Rutgers, I think that is one to. I'll definitely have my eye on that one a bit more than usual. I'm intrigued to see, and Ohio State Hopkins as well. Wish those games were not happening at the same time.
Yeah, you would think with this season we'd have a little bit more separation, and of
Sure,
course the Big
like,
Ten's for all the great things that they do,
like,
they put 2 games out at the same time.
Like, dudes, you're only gonna have 3 games a week. Like,
and you put the
two
biggest games at the same time. Like the Michigan-Maryland game could be at the same time as one of them. No, we're gonna pop them both at the same time.
And Maryland, like, I know the usually the SID argument about how difficult it is to schedule these games, but we are seeing more kind of spread out, and the Maryland women are on the road, so there's no facilities kind of issue, and Maryland plays. No one else is using the football stadium, so that game could have been a bit later. The Big Ten, bros, you got 3 games, like
3 games. Literally an entire network and the Big Ten Plus available to space them out.
Like, we'll get a bit more because Friday at 5:30 there's Maryland Penn State, next week. But hopefully Ohio State Rutgers and Michigan Johns Hopkins are not clashing.
So those are our picks. After you're done listening to this episode, we had a special R&R podcast episode that Chris had with the commissioner of the Atlantic Sun, or A-Sun they call themselves now, Ted Gumbart. The A-Sun, of course, added men's lacrosse. They're going to have a little split with the SoCon. We've pitched in our 2 cents on how that's looking like a great move for everybody involved. Chris had a great conversation with Ted. We highly check that out on Podomatic or wherever you get your podcast. Your subscription to College Crossecast, of course, also applies to the R&R podcast. So check that out. Great conversation.
College Cross Network, baby. It's growing.
Otherwise, that'll just about do it for this episode. So we thank you for joining along. You can follow us at college_cross on Twitter as well as Instagram. We've been pumping in some more Instagram content than years past. Additionally, you can follow me on Twitter at RyanMcD29.
At Jake_Nazar.
I am at Erie_Barrister.
And we hope you enjoyed this weekend's games. I'm not going to be on next week, but I'll be joining in and out as the season progresses if you missed me. But otherwise, the rest of the crew's got you all covered, and I've got you covered with the infographics on the social media outlets anyway. So looking out for you even when I'm not on the podcast. But we really appreciate you listening. Remember to subscribe to College Crosscast and the Family of Podcast with it. We're on Apple Podcast. We're on Google Play. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon, I believe, as well. We're on a whole bunch of stuff. So wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to us, and you'll get it as soon as these episodes drop. But in the meantime, we thank you so much for listening. And as always, even if it's the dead of winter and it's very cold, we hope everybody's staying safe and warm. But remember, as I lift up my glass of water because we're recording the video, stay hydrated.
Becky Lynch for president.